5 minutes of careful planning can lose or gain you marks in the AQA Paper 3 essay. Here you will learn how to ensure your plan is setting you up to access the higher marking bands and to ensure that you are writing a truly synoptic essay, not a mind blurt at partially GCSE level. We are going to make sure you know what topics are classed as the same specification area, so cannot be selected for more than one of your 4 paragraphs. We will also highlight danger topics which students commonly write at only GCSE level, so that you can avoid them or use the suggested keywords to ensure you are writing at A level. Then we will work on ensuring our AO2 application of knowledge doesn't end up as vague GCSE references, commonly seen by examiners, leading to a cap of 15 marks. I will teach you easy ways to ensure your discussion is truly synoptic by linking to several specific A-level references to the Mrs. GREN 7 life processes that all organisms must do to be a living organism. If this is your first introduction to the Paper 3 essay, I recommend you watch the video in the details below first, called Write Like Examiners Want, and then come back to this video. So the Paper 3 essay is a great opportunity to show what you know and pick the topics that you are confident to write about. We have a synoptic title, synoptic meaning a comprehensive view of a whole subject, and the title will almost certainly ask you to discuss the importance of something. It's expected that you discuss a minimum of 4 topics at A-level standard to achieve marks above 15 out of 25. However, the average mark is fairly consistent, around 13 to 14 every year. And the mode is 15 because students make the same mistakes regardless of the title. And one of these mistakes is accidentally covering only 3 topics from the specification because their 4th paragraph is from a specification area already covered in their other 3 topics. To even potentially access above 15 marks, you must have these 4 different areas of the specification. So, what topics must you not select to write about as separate topics? The first is DNA and RNA, that both come under reference 3151. Now, this doesn't mean when you write about them you must reference both RNA and DNA. To be clear, we are saying you cannot use the structure and function of these nucleic acids as 2 of your 4 chosen paragraphs. The detailed role of RNA in protein synthesis, however, would be allowed as a separate topic. However, you couldn't write about transcription as 1 paragraph and translation as another paragraph because these both come under 3.4.2 DNA and protein synthesis. Moving down the list, you cannot write about the role of different organelles in the cell as different paragraphs, as they all come under 3211. And you cannot write separate paragraphs on mitosis and binary fission for 2 out of your 4 topics. You would be allowed, however, mitosis and meiosis, as meiosis has a different specification number to mitosis. The different methods of transport across membranes are all also considered the same area of the specification. Now, you could make these separate topics by going into detail on separate examples of these. For example, absorption for co-transport, gas exchange for simple diffusion, osmoregulation for osmosis, and nerve transmission for facilitated diffusion. Another topic to beware when planning is the entire chapter on cell recognition and immunity is the same specification number. So cell-mediated response, humoral response, structure of antibodies, vaccination programs, HIV and AIDS, and the use of monoclonal antibodies are all the same specification number. So make sure you are not selecting from this chapter for more than one of your paragraphs of AO1 recall. Gas exchange is another topic that catches students out, and they write multiple paragraphs on gas exchange, thinking that gas exchange in fish is a separate area of the specification to human gas exchange. It isn't. Pick just one for your essay if covering this topic, and beware choosing human gas exchange. We will discuss later the danger of choosing this topic. Digestion and absorption come under the same reference number. However, the overlap between this topic and transport across membranes would mean examiners would probably give you the benefit of the doubt if writing about 2 from this topic, providing you haven't already got a previous paragraph based on transport across membranes. Transpiration and translocation are the same reference number, so just pick one to write about in your AO1. I personally would probably choose translocation, as transpiration would run the risk of being GCSE as we build on it less in the A-level course. Now, two big topics we could write so much about are photosynthesis and respiration. However, pick just one area of each of these if you choose them. You could write about the electron transport chain and the light-dependent reaction of photosynthesis, and also oxidative phosphorylation in aerobic respiration, as they are two separate topics, even though they are similarities in concepts. You couldn't, however, choose to write about the light-dependent reaction and then another paragraph on limiting factors, as they both come under photosynthesis. For both respiration and photosynthesis topics, I would pick a section to write about in detail that links most closely to the title and make those links really clear in your writing. Please do not write everything you know on aerobic respiration from start to finish, as this will be a significant waste of your time. From the nutrient cycle section, please do not write about both the nitrogen and phosphorus cycle thinking they are two topics, as they're the same reference number. Personally, I would select the phosphorus cycle, as some GCSE exam boards do cover the nitrogen cycle at GCSE, and it is a topic where I see so many errors cropping up with the names and roles of molecules and organisms. The response specification section 3611 is an area that trips students up lots. You cannot write about taxis and tropism as separate paragraphs. Again, you must only pick one and then pick three totally different paragraphs for your further three. Examiners may be more lenient if you select tropisms and the reflex arc, for example, as some of the content in the reflex arc could link to the nerves topic 3621, so they may decide to class that paragraph under a different reference number. Photoreceptors and Pacinian corpuscle, again, only pick one of them. Don't write about both and think that they're two separate topics. You could, however, choose to write about chemo and baroreceptors in control of heart rate, as this has a different reference number, 3613. Synapses and neuromuscular junctions are both the same topic. Again, just pick one. Negative and positive feedback both come under 3641. However, you could go into more detail on an example of negative feedback for a second paragraph, for example, osmoregulation. Now, the action of insulin, glucagon, and adrenaline all is one topic, so pick one and write about it well. Don't feel you have to write about all three. The final area of the specification to be aware of is gene technology. 3841, recombinant DNA technology. You cannot write about making DNA fragments and PCR as a separate topic, and genetic engineering, making recombinant plasmids as a separate topic, and gene therapy as a separate topic. They are all the same specification reference. So let's see how we might plan this in the exam. I would recommend at the start of the exam you check the essay titles. Don't plan anything yet, just have them in the back of your mind when working through the other questions, as ideas and examples may pop into your head which you can use in the essay. Start the essay with 45 minutes to go and aim to plan for 5 minutes and execute for 40 minutes. If you are worried that with 45 minutes to go you still have a lot of shorter questions unfinished, start the essay, write about 3 topics well, then return to the shorter questions. The reason why I say this is most people who write a fourth paragraph still get capped at 15 for errors and lack of depth, and you can get 15 marks from 3 good paragraphs also. Now, when planning, select your 4 topics and for each, jot down A-level standard keywords you should include for AO1 recall, and then what the AO2 wider discussion points could reference. Now, the key to breaking the 15 mark barrier is making no errors, so pick your topics carefully, and ensuring you write at A-level, not GCSE. So include the A-level links in your plan. Here is an example of one on the title, The Importance of Enzymes in Living Organisms. I've chosen my 4 different topics and listed some A-level terminology relevant to the title to include in my AO1. Now, I want you to be aware when picking any of the following topics for your AO1 recall paragraphs. They are harder to make A-level and students commonly only write at GCSE. So if you choose them, make sure you get in some of the suggested A-level key terms here. So let's go back to my plan. I've picked my 4 topics and I have my A-level AO1 recall. I need to plan the AO2 application for each of these paragraphs. Now, this is where I make synoptic links between the AO1 recall I chose and other areas of the specification in the format of discussion. And I emphasise discussion. It must not be find a connection to another area of the specification and mind blurt everything you know. Synoptic means an overview. So, really, we ought to be able to connect our chosen AO1 recall to multiple other areas of the specification to show a broad understanding of its context in biology. So, my first topic was the Calvin cycle and the enzymes involved in it. So, imagine we've got a lovely paragraph of AO1 at A level, and then this is our AO2. And this is a common example of AO2 which doesn't meet synoptic A level standard. Now, this is relevant discussion, but it doesn't show any additional knowledge gained from studying A level. So let's try and identify some A-level discussion on the importance of enzymes from the Calvin cycle using the acronym Mrs. GREN. Now, you may remember this from Year 7. So all living organisms must be able to do these 7 things: move, reproduce, sense their environment, grow, respire, excrete waste created by cells, and obtain nutrition. Now let's use this to prompt some A-level links between the question title and the Calvin cycle, which was our chosen AO1 recall. So the Calvin cycle produces glucose, so let's start with respiration and nutrition. The Calvin cycle produces the nutrition plants need in the form of glucose, which is then used in glycolysis to produce ATP. If we then consider the other life processes, tropisms are an example of the plant sensing the environment and moving by growth towards the stimulus. And the Calvin cycle is important for this, as the glucose produced is the chemical energy cells need to generate ATP to drive these processes. Glucose also provides atoms to biosynthesize free DNA and RNA nucleotides to replicate DNA and form gametes. So, this is our link to reproduction. Excretion is less relevant to essay title discussion, as the title is often important to organisms, and the whole point of excretion is it's getting rid of products that we don't need. So, we will leave it out in this example. So let's remind ourselves of our vague GCSE AO2 discussion that we had, and we can turn it into this. So pause the video and have a read. So I've underlined in bold the A-level references we've now put into our discussion, and you can see we have linked to several other areas of the specification. So now let's look back at my plan and plan some AO2 for my paragraph on synapses, which include the enzymes acetylcholinesterase and ATP synthase. Now, a typical example of AO2 linked to synapses, which doesn't meet AO2 standards, would look something like this. And I cannot tell you how many times I have read AO2 like this. Enzymes involved in synapses are important for organisms' survival to move and escape predators. So you will see again, we are only GCSE. It's very brief, it's very vague, and no A-level knowledge is shown. So let's use Mrs. GREN to find some wider links to the importance of synapse function, including the enzymes that we discussed in our AO1. So these enzymes are important to enable discrete action potentials and avoid continuous stimulation and muscle contraction. So movement and sensitivity links are really clear here. So if we think about movement, courtship behaviours are needed to attract suitable mates. Taxis and kinesis are important to move to more favourable environments. Try to pick more A-level examples over just escaping from predators. Reproduction we've referenced in our courtship behaviours, and we can further extend our sensitivity section by considering the communication of changes in blood pH, for example, and pressure via chemoreceptors and baroreceptors. Growth is less directly linked to synapses, so let's not try and force a tenuous link and move on to respiration. So, we know that synapses allow heart rate to be controlled to maintain sufficient supply of oxygen and glucose to cells. Through excretion, we know that synapses communicate the need to increase heart rate to rid the body of excess CO2 that is reducing blood pH. Then, if we think about nutrition, synapses are going to allow organisms to coordinate movement for hunting and foraging for food, for which organisms are going to be experiencing interspecies competition and intraspecies competition. So, let's have a look at what this improved paragraph would look like. Pause the video and have a read. Now, let's look back at my third topic and plan some AO2. A typical weak AO2 paragraph for respiration is as follows. Enzymes involved in respiration are therefore crucial to provide sufficient ATP for cellular and biological processes needed for organisms to survive. Without these enzymes, organisms would die. Now, as you can see, this is again very, very vague. There's no additional A-level knowledge here. Now, planning AO2 for respiration using Mrs. GREN is really easy. So let's just find uses of ATP produced from respiration and link to each life process. Let's now put it into a paragraph. And here we are. Pause the video and have a read. Now, my fourth topic chosen was enzymes involved in DNA synthesis. Now, DNA replication occurs in the cell cycle in interphase, and that's crucial to enable growth by mitosis and gamete formation for reproduction. So, that's growth and reproduction linked very easily. For respiration, mitochondria that perform aerobic respiration have their own DNA, which must be replicated when organelles replicate. And for the other life processes, we can discuss the need to repair the tissues involved in nutrition, excretion, movement, and sensitivity. So here is my final AO2 section produced from my plan. So I hope you now feel more confident to pick 4 separate topics from the specification and produce a 5-minute plan that is going to ensure you use sufficient A-level depth in your AO1 recall and your AO2 application. And this will enable you to access those top marks. Now, we haven't covered off-spec content in this video, but there will be guidance available in another video. And one last piece of advice on planning essays. If you are practicing planning different titles and using AI to generate example top mark essays, in my experience, AI is very bad at producing essays with the necessary AO2 discussion. AI doesn't seem to quite understand the depth the examiners expect in discussion and often give quite fluffy AO2. Most essays I've seen from AI fall into multistructural bands, despite it telling you it is a 25 out of 25. So thank you for watching. Good luck with your essay on the day. And remember to check out some of the other A-level biology videos. We've got ones on maths equations you must learn, common terminology errors, and the new official abbreviations list from AQA, which could impact stringency of mark schemes moving forward.